What happens in the nervous system when someone strikes a pressure point. Now, the neurology is extremely complex, and so what I've tried to do is to boil it down. This diagram here shows the spinal cord and the nerves. I've been studying this for about 35 years, and I still find it complex. I understand it, but I find it complex, and I find when I try to share it with people, it's way too complex. So let's take a look at what happens here. Now, what we have depicted here is this is right here. And what we're dealing with, if you look here on the ends, these are called receptors. And I've marked on here 3 of the different kinds of receptors. Receptors are what you strike and what sends the message into the spine and up to the brain. So we have the most common area to our interest is what are called nociceptors. They are basically pain. And so what happens is when you strike the receptor, the nerve that goes like up your arm is a combination of motor and sensory nerves. But this is where people have a lot of problems. You have to think of the motor and sensory nerves as 2 one-way streets. Sensory always goes in. Motor always goes out. You can't have motor coming in and that type of thing. It's a one-way street, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes. So think of this nerve here, which is actually a bundle of nerve fibers called axons. Think of that as a two-way street, because you have both motor and sensory. Now, some people wonder, how can you hit the arm and affect someone's heart? How can you knock somebody out by hitting them on the arm? I'm glad you asked. Because right here is depicting the sympathetic chain. See here in blue? This is the sympathetic chain here. And that's what it's depicting here on both sides. And so there's a connection, a nerve connection. In Dr. Kelly's book, he referred to convergence. Think of it like the sensory nerves that produce pain having a connection with the nerves that affect your organs. So you strike a nerve here, it goes in, sends the signal in, and affects things. Like with here, it affects the organs. But it can also take another pathway where it comes in the back here, where the sensory nerves come from, and it makes a connection with the spinal cord. Now, you all remember the knee reflex? That's the simplest kind of action that takes place, because there's an effect of the receptor. It goes into the spinal cord. At the spinal cord, it makes a connection, does a U-turn, and comes right back out. That's why when they tap your knee, it kicks out, because of that reaction. Now, typically what happens, though, other than reflexes, is when you strike the point, the nociceptors send the pain into the spinal cord. Now, at that point, it goes up. When it goes up, I have it marked here with the different sections of the brain. We have the medulla, the pons, the midbrain, and the cerebellum. And what's important about that is we've talked a lot about cranial nerves. Well, this is showing, I hope we'll edit that out. But this is showing here medulla, pons, and midbrain. You notice up here in yellow the midbrain, and you have the 3rd cranial nerve coming off it. The pons has the 7th cranial nerve coming off of it, and the medulla has the 9th and 10th. What do we call the 10th? 10th nerve? Vagus. There we go. And vagus means, in Latin, means wandering. It meanders all over the body and touches most of the organs. Now, from these sections of the brain all intercommunicate. Have you heard that we only use 10% of our brain?
Sir?
Well, I've met people that only use 10% of the brain. Everybody in here uses it all. Because of these interconnections, it's not completely understood, but there's information being sent out. So when this signal comes in, think of it like an amplifier. And it amplifies the signal and sends some here, sends some here, sends some here. And the brain interprets different things, like it gets hit. Oh, I guess that hurt. How do we feel about pain? I want to cry. Well, that's tied in when you go up to the cerebrum to interpret it. And I think I may be getting a little bit deep. I'm seeing some eyes glaze over. But basically, when you strike, it's a connection from one of those mechanonociceptors or thermoreceptors. It's a straight shot to the brain. And there's a portion of your brain that will interpret that, interpret the pain or the heat or the cold. And from there, the signal is sent down. And it's sent down the spinal cord, and in the front is where the motor nerves are. Think of motor as action. And it sends a signal out through the motor nerves, down the nerves, and out to the area. So if it's muscle pain, it goes in, up, gets interpreted, gets sent out. But remember, one-way streets, sensory in, motor out. Now, before I say anything else, are there any questions? We are opening up for questions.
Yes. So when it comes back out as a motor, your reflex is to pull back?
Well, the motor's always there, but what happens is when you strike, like the knee reflex on the patellar tendon, it sends a signal into the spinal cord. And there, instead of going up to the brain, it just turns right around and sends a signal right out through here. But it comes in this way and comes out that way. And that's the only way it can come in or go out.
So what you're saying is it doesn't go to the brain. At that point, it just goes in and comes out.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the reflex arc. And there's only a few of them in the body. Like this is, you test, like the doctors will test the 5th nerve, 6th nerve, 7th nerve from the neck. Here tests L4, the patellar. This tests S1 down here at the bottom. And those are a way to test the pure nerve on the motor portion. Now the sensory portion, you've heard of dermatones. Well, dermatones, I'm going to make a gross oversimplification, but imagine me dividing my arm here and here. C5, 6, 7, C8, T1, and so on. So each area is represented on the body from one of those sensory nerves. Did that answer your question? If I can grossly oversimplify it, think of what we're doing as a way to hack into the nervous system. The ancients found a way to get into the nervous system and tweak it and make it do certain things. And to me, that's a lot of what the pressure points are. To me, pressure points are neurology. They're a way to hack into the nervous system.